Well, UFC 197 is officially in the books. As expected, Jon Jones and Demetrius Johnson pick up wins, but a funny thing happened along the way. We will get into that right here on the MMAfighting.com post-fight wrap-up. I'm Ariel Helwani, sleepy in Las Vegas alongside Luke Thomas, Shaun Al-Shatti. We're doing this one more time, guys. Let's end on a high note. So, Jon Jones, he is the new interim light heavyweight champion. Didn't seem too keen on holding that belt, celebrating that belt, but he got the victory. He defeats Ovin St. Preux via unanimous decision. It was a pretty dominant performance, but notable, after this press conference, Jon Jones left in a wheelchair. He says he wants to fight at UFC 200 on July 9th. We'll see about that later on next week. But for now, Luke, let's start with you. What did you make of Jon Jones' performance?
Yeah, it really depends on your perspective. I thought there was a lot of ring rust. He didn't think there was much, if any at all. I guess it's a matter of perspective. He really thought it was an opponent switch issue. I did a piece on Jones before the fight, talking to all of his coaches about the last year. And one thing they'll tell you is, one, he's a quick learner, but two, he very much is just a guy who follows a lot of habits, creature of habits, right? Like, this is what he does all the time. And when that gets out of sync, he gets out of sync. And I think maybe that's an explanation for what you saw tonight, because it just didn't seem – look, I mean, even if that was half of what it was good enough to win an interim title and beat Ovin St. Preux, who I thought was surprisingly better than I thought he was going to be, although he was dull in parts too. But it just wasn't a good representative of the upper bound limit, I think, of Jones. I think that, you think of Jones as magic and his ferocity. Caught a little glimpse of that in that fourth round. That was really about it. So the question for me is, I think he did get better over the last 15 months, whatever it was. But if he's right and the coaches are right, you won't see that until the DC fight. So to me, let's see what happens if that does happen, and then we can make a better, fuller assessment.
Yeah, afterwards, Dana White said that OSP actually broke his hand in maybe the fourth or fifth round, so that is notable as well. I said his hand. Yes, it was his arm. Correct. Overall, do you think? I mean, there's a thought out there. If Daniel Cormier was in there tonight and Jon Jones looked like that, Cormier would have won. Styles make fights, and he had been preparing for Cormier. Do you think Cormier wins tonight if he fights Jon Jones? Can you look into your crystal ball and see the future?
I mean, who can say, right? I mean, Daniel certainly seemed to think that he would have won if he would have faced this Jon Jones. But like you said, Jon Jones is a creature of habit, and he seemed very when someone at the press conference asked him, does this make up for UFC 151? And he was very happy to answer that question. He basically said, this pays it all back. He said he's not a guy who takes these short notice fights. He basically said he's been preparing for Daniel for 7 months, and he got a last-second switch to a very, very, very different opponent. And so, like Luke said, perhaps we would have seen a completely different Jon Jones had he, been fighting Daniel Cormier. But it is hard to say, because that did look like a lot of ring rust. It took him a while to get going, and it was strange because when it started, like when he was walking out to coming home and everything, it felt like a moment. Like, it felt like a big situation, big scene. And then the air slowly got sucked out of the arena over the course of the first 3 rounds. It was a very strange situation, because it almost felt like a little bit maybe Jon was playing with his food, and then you kind of, as it keeps happening and happening, you kind of wonder, maybe he just really does have ring rust. So it is hard to say.
Yeah, perhaps the most ordinary Jon Jones we've seen in the UFC. You and I were back here, and we saw people leave before the fight was even out. Like the fight was even over, and people were walking out of this place. It was kind of surreal for a Jones fight, because he's always been so dynamic, and his finishes are usually very exciting as well. So he says that he wants to fight Daniel Cormier on July 9th, and we hope that Daniel Cormier is healthy. Does that make up for this whole, now that it's over and everything that happened this week with Conor and whatnot, is that an okay plan B now, or are you okay with this?
Would have been better if he had obviously had an emphatic win in some kind of way tonight, like Demetrius Johnson did. He didn't, but I think it covers for it a fair bit. Look, it gives the UFC enough reason to say this is something we can sell. Right. We can't sell it Conor McGregor style, but we can sell this pretty good rivalry. They've got enough promotional material at this point to really make it work. So yeah, I think. And again, look, we're in April. When July fight week comes around after the 4th of July, everyone is going to be pretty amped about that week. Opinions and passions are going to get more inflamed and heated. And I think come that time, whatever tepid feelings we might have now, I suspect they'll be a little bit more inflamed.
I asked one of Jon Jones's coaches, Brandon Gibson, after the fight, what was the one part of the fight that you really didn't like? And he said perhaps at times he didn't see that killer instinct, that drive to finish.
Yeah.
Do you think that was there for John, and for whatever reason he didn't take it? Did you see that there?
I mean, I feel like he even acknowledged it, right? Like he's saying, he's able to see all of these openings and situations, but he's only able to capitalize on
Yeah.
about 50 or 60% of them. And I mean, that seems pretty valid. I mean, maybe that's him just making excuses, but that makes sense to me considering what I saw.
I just want to make this publicly known because it's been driving me crazy. Again, is it ring rust? Is it switching of opponent? We can debate that. But people were being like, well, Dominic Cruz came back from 3 years. This is the all-time dumbest argument floating around in mixed martial arts today. This is like saying, well, Steph Curry hits threes after crossing the half-point line. Why can't your point guard do that? Well, because that's Steph Curry. The level that Dominic Cruz set from coming back from layoff, injury or otherwise, you may never see someone do that the rest of the time we watch combat sports until we die. That's how special that is. So please, can we just retire the Dominic Cruz did it after 3 years? No one is going to touch that anytime soon.
Yeah, and I will also add that even though he lost 5 rounds to none, it does kind of feel like OSP's stock went up a little bit today.
It's mixed, though. I don't know how you felt about it. There were times that I was like, wow, his cardio was better. He's landing a little bit. But then that 4th and 5th round, you felt he was just like, I'm going to survive, I'm going to hang out, and I'm going to get a little shine from this, which I understand in certain capacities. So I'm like, I'm a little bit mixed on the whole thing.
Also did have a broken arm, though.
Yeah, no, look, he's a tough guy. He's a top fighter. It's just, I think you're right, but then there are parts of it I'm just like, I don't know.
All right, let's move along now to the co-main event. Demetrius Johnson comes in there and starches Henry Cejudo. Cejudo gets an early takedown, but shortly thereafter, DJ finishes Cejudo with some brutal knees and then some elbows. Wow, a first-round TKO for Demetrius Johnson, proving once again that he's the greatest flyweight of all time. That wasn't really in doubt, but notable for him, he now has 8 successful title defenses, 2 away from tying Anderson Silva, of course, 3 away from breaking that record. That's something he really wants. So he is well on his way. What a performance. To me, this was up there with that Sacramento knockout of Joseph Benavidez. Perhaps maybe even more impressive. What do you think?
It was pretty stunning, to be honest. I mean, to eat up an Olympic wrestler in the clinch like that, that's a different level of impressive. I mean, Henry, even at the press conference, was saying that was the one area I thought I could dominate was the clinch. And it took, less than 3 minutes? And it was strange, too, because the knees that he was hitting him with, he was working angles while he was hitting the knees. And then,
amazing.
yeah, when Henry staggered back, I wasn't even quite sure what had hit him. It was all so fast, and then it was just over. It was a very tremendous performance.
Are you as blown away by this performance by DJ?
I'm blown away how history has repeated itself. You know, when the fight was over, the first thought I had was like, wow, that's the best clinch mauling I've seen in a UFC title fight since Anderson Silva just annihilated Rich Franklin. And I still think that one's a little bit better because remember Rich Franklin's nose was like pointing to the west or something. But it was so bizarre because if you go back, and this is true, when Rich Franklin was asked after that fight what went wrong in the clinch, he goes, I thought I was going to dominate there. The whole camp we planned we were going to dominate in the clinch, and then he just got wrecked. And then you hear Cejudo say the exact same thing. It was stunning. Truly, look, everyone talks about, if you talk to boxers, you ask about MMA fighters, what do they all say? Well, you know, they're a jack of all trades, a master of none. He's a master of all trades. He can submit you, wrestle you, box you on the inside, maul you on the inside with the clinch, stay on the outside. His cardio never fades. He is such a tremendous talent.
And I feel compelled to say, if you can't get up for a DJ fight at this point, if you don't get excited by the idea of this man fighting, if you don't appreciate him, then I don't know if I can call you an MMA fan. I mean, like, what more does he have to do to get you to appreciate him? Now everyone's wondering, including myself, what do they do next with him? I mean, like, they had this idea for Tough 24. They canceled the tryouts. Dana is non-committal at the press conference. Literally, if you look at the rankings, sure, you could put in a Wilson Hayes who's on a 1-fight winning streak. They've done this sort of thing before. But if you look at the rankings, the top 15, there is literally no challenges left for him. What do you do with him next?
It's looking sparse, right? And it's almost funny to think that the idea of throwing someone from Tough on there, because we just saw a very, Henry Cejudo is a great fighter. He's a top 10 flyweight. 3 minutes. If you throw in just some guy from Tough on there, like, how bad is that going to be? I think at this point, Joseph Benavidez has just been working hard enough. He's been winning enough fights that you can justify giving him one more.
That's disrespectful to DJ. You can't just keep throwing out the same people over and over again.
You're right, but that's the situation we find ourselves in. And he keeps talking about the Dominic Cruz fight he has for a little bit. to me, that's a top 3 fight I would want to see right now in the sport. That is an incredible fight, and I have no read on how that would go. But other than that, it's looking sparse, and that's kind of the situation we find ourselves in with it now. Is because of his greatness, and because of the lack of depth in the division. All of the prospects that are coming up at 125 are going to be inevitably rushed into title shots, exactly like Henry would. Henry would have benefited from fighting a couple more times before he got here, and he even acknowledged that. So guys like Sergio Pettis, Ray Borg, these guys that are coming up, they're going to inevitably be rushed into title shots far too soon, just like a Kyoji Horiguchi was. That's just how this landscape works right now, and it seems like we're just going to see Demetrius on top for a long, long time.
Yeah, and the thing about DJ is he's so active and so reliable that he doesn't give them time to build contenders. Do you have any ideas as for what's next for him?
Look, if the problem is as long as he's trying to defend the title, he needs to be fed people, then maybe you don't feed him for a while. And the only way to do that is to have him go up a little bit. Maybe have him take a super fight in the interim, and maybe do a 4-man contender tournament, not like a Bjorn Rebney tournament, but a tournament, and then figure out some guy there. But as long as he's sitting there waiting, being like, who's next, to your point, they're going to just keep giving him guys well before they're ready. People were calling him the top pound-for-pound fighter in the sport, and I'm not going to argue too much with it. Maybe it's true, probably it's true, but one of the knocks on that argument is, well, how can that be if he's getting guys that everyone admits is getting those title shots long before they're prepared?
Right.
So to me, I really think 135 or catchweight fight, do something. To do the Cruz fight again, have him fight TJ Dillashaw or John Dodson at 135, something. Because as he stays at 125, that problem just keeps manifesting itself.
Wait, so I have to ask you this question because it's been a really hot topic, perhaps the most interesting topic of the night because they both fought on this card. DJ, John Jones, one looked very dominant. The other dominant as well, but in a different way. One didn't get the finish, the other did. Who is the pound-for-pound king right now? Is it possible that DJ surpassed John Jones tonight?
I think you can make a credible argument for it. I still lean John Jones, and everyone's going to go, they're not going to believe that. But here's the truth. You look at his resume, he's just been in a much, much tougher, thicker division that's been around for a lot longer, and he's done a lot more in it. That's just the truth of the matter. Now, tonight, who was better? I mean, come on. Demetrius Johnson was the best guy on the whole card, period. That was virtuoso. I mean, he was incredible. But I still feel like it's debatable.
Yeah.
It's debatable. And that should tell you, actually, what Demetrius Johnson's doing.
Sure.
Because he has less to work with, and he's doing more with it.
Your pick?
I mean, I'd still lean John Jones, but ultimately, who cares, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is 1A and 1B at this point. We're just throwing darts at the board at that point.
It's a fun barbershop
Yeah.
little argument. If Demetrius Johnson was 205 pounds, what would that fight look like? All right, now before we go, we have to talk about one of the very big storylines out of tonight's event, Anthony Pettis losing his 3rd fight in a row. It's surreal even saying that. Anthony Pettis losing his 3rd fight in a row. He has not won since UFC 181 when he defeated Gilbert Melendez. And on that night, we thought that he was on his way to becoming the greatest lightweight of all time. Now he is 5-4 in the UFC. His brother, Sergio Pettis, who's had, kind of a middle-of-the-road UFC run, has the same amount of wins as him at this point, which is stunning in its own right. So he loses to Edson Barbosa 3-0. Barbosa finally gets over the hump. He finally wins that big fight. But to me, all I can keep thinking about is Anthony Pettis has lost 3 fights in a row. What has happened to Showtime?
It really is bizarre. It's surreal. It's utterly surreal to think about that 1 year ago, or maybe a year and a month ago. This was a guy on the Wheaties box. He was the guy with the looks and the belt, and he felt like the next star. Within 1 year, 3 losses. Where is he now in the division? He's still in the top 10, but probably in the lower tier of that. It's completely bizarre, and it's just because he hasn't even looked like that Anthony Pettis. Like, that Anthony Pettis has been missing since that RDA fight, the Eddie fight, and even tonight he seemed gun shy, and even when he was pulling the trigger, it wasn't landing, and I don't know. It's so strange to think about how quickly things can change in this sport. Just like a year ago or a year and a half ago, Benson Henderson and Anthony Pettis are the number 1 and the number 2 in this division, and now back-to-back nights they both lose very bad losses.
Yeah, Benson Henderson losing in his Bellator debut on Friday night against Andrei Koreshkov. Make sense of this. How do you explain what has happened to Anthony Pettis, and especially looking at tonight's performance?
Well, at least Henderson has the ability to say, I fought a guy who was, some monster from Russia in a different weight class. Okay, fair enough. Man, You know what's weird about the Pettis losses, especially after, the RDA one, you thought he was being stoic in defeat. And then the Alvarez happened, and then this happened. And after all those losses, he doesn't ever seem to be that bothered by it. You never see him look forlorn. You never see him look like, it's weird. You want someone to be a professional, and he was like kind of clapping for the other guy, which I guess I also appreciate in some level. But on some level, it's like, I want you to be disturbed by this because I'm disturbed by this. This is a disturbing trend in your career. To your point, I think he's right. He was inaccurate. He didn't seem to just – he looked like he had a good game plan, but he didn't execute it to its fullest extent. Look, he's fighting tough guys. He fought Dos Anjos, Alvarez, and Edson Barboza. That's a murderer's row, but he didn't really show up in any of them. Like, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know if Greg Jackson can or is going to fix it. It's just a shocking turn of events. But I really wonder about his attitude. He had this ferocity, you thought, going in, and it only manifests itself maybe in a delusional sense. Like, there never seems to be this moment of like, oh my God, I need to fix this. It's just, I'll get it next time. Will you? I don't know that you will.
Yeah, and we're used to seeing this sort of thing when a former champion hits, mid-30s or so. Anthony Pettis is supposed to be in his prime right now. This was not part of the plan. We did not expect it. But don't take anything away from Edson Barboza. Like I said, this was his big opportunity to get over that hump, and he did so with flying colors. Turn
toe marks.
the toe and turn Pettis's lead leg inside of his thigh like purple. I mean, that was unbelievable out of Edson Barboza. Okay, a few other notes before we go. Robert Whitaker defeated Sapo Natal. Nice performance out of Robert Whitaker. How about Yair Rodriguez?
Oh,
that
my
knockout,
goodness.
maybe one of the best knockouts we have ever seen inside the octagon. He knocks out Andre Fili in impressive fashion. If you did not see it, go out of your way to try to find that. A couple other ones, Sergio Pettis, the brother of Anthony Pettis, he got a nice win. Anyone else? James Vick, is there any other performance that we need to talk about before we say goodbye tonight?
Carla Esparza got a good win to get back on her feet, but she also seemed – it was weird. If you just watched the body language in the cage, it was like, this didn't look so good. But then when she got here – boy, she really was trying to exorcise demons from that Joanna Jędrzejczyk fight. Like, she was just trying to get a win to put distance between her and that terrible life event, basically. So I'm not ready to count her out by any stretch, but it was, she got traumatized, I think, by that Jędrzejczyk loss. So good for her to get back on the winning streak, and let's see where she can go from here.
Kevin Lee gets back on track. Final thought, any other fight you want to talk about?
Dominic Steele versus Danny Roberts fight. That was tremendous fight. Also, though, man, I'm still buzzing about the Yair Rodriguez knockout. Just the way, the sound that Andre Fili made when he smashed into the canvas was thunderous. It was unbelievable. And as to Robert Whitaker, 4-0 at middleweight now. It's almost like dehydrating your body to make a weight class you shouldn't be in is bad for you.
Wow.
Kind of crazy, right?
Yes. Kind of crazy. All right. On that note, we say goodbye. What a fun week in Las Vegas, huh?
Hey, I cannot wait to leave this dump.
All right. The circus is over. It has been a memorable week for many different reasons, not all related to UFC 197, but nonetheless, enjoyed covering the event with you guys. Fun as always, and we appreciate you watching our coverage of UFC 197 all week long from here in Sin City. Back on Monday for the MMA Hour, so stick around for that. For now, we say goodnight from Las Vegas. For Shaun, for Luke, I'm Ariel. Again, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on Monday.